get kind of the vibe of the conference and what people are really talking about, I've got two great guests here with me, John Truscott, Kelly Rossman McKinney. Kelly is the CEO and John is the president of Truscott Rossman PR. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. It's always nice to sit down with both of you, kind of the start of the conference. It's very interesting to get the sense of what people are talking about every year. Where have we been, I guess, in the last year, John? When you walk through the doors of the Grand Hotel again this year, what are you starting to hear?
I've heard that for the first thing, when I checked in and talking to some of the other sponsors of the event, they said you can tell the economy's turning around. Look at the gift bags, it's full this year. Last year was pretty sparse, but there's a lot more entertaining, there are a lot more events. People seem to be feeling better, like we've turned a corner. And I think the focus on education is emblematic of that we can do all these things in Michigan, but if we don't have a well-educated workforce to take the jobs, to improve the economy, we're going to get left behind. So I think the focus is on the right spot, and I think people are feeling really, really good this year.
Kelly, what's your sense?
Well, I got up a little bit after John, but what I noticed is a higher level of folks who are here. I mean, you're really talking CEO and C-suite folks, where I think the last couple of years, not only were there fewer folks, but they weren't necessarily at the highest level of their organization. So it's great to see that. The issues, I think education, I fully expect that transportation will continue to be discussed ad nauseum like it always is at this event. But I also think people are really talking a lot about the situation in Detroit itself. Kevin Orr's report, the mayoral race itself, there will be a mayoral debate on the island, so it'll be really interesting to see how that issue and the concern, the deep concern about the future and fate of Detroit plays out. This is, I think, the first year where there's a significant number of West Michigan business people at this conference, so it is really becoming much more of a statewide event, still with a Detroit focus.
I want to talk about the politics in just a moment, but I think it's very unique that you have the Detroit Regional Chamber that puts this event on and gets the amount of people up here and the amount of business leaders that all seem to have a pretty personal vested interest in Southeast Michigan and specifically in Detroit.
There's no doubt about it. You look at a lot of the corporate leaders, they work in the city, they live around the city, but they're putting a lot back. They're the philanthropic leaders and the people that are really trying to rebuild. They're the ones who donate to the Grand Prix or other major events. So there is a vested interest. I think there's a love for the city and a desire to see it recover. When you look at, one big difference this year from last year, look at all that Dan Gilbert has purchased since last year. All the buildings and everything that's going back.
The man's on a buying spree, let's just be honest.
Downtown is a completely different place in a year. As a result. And I think that fever is kind of contagious and that other people want to jump in. They want to be located downtown. We're opening an office downtown to expand on what we've had. So
or Midtown. Let's not limit.
Anybody with space, we're open. We can be pitched on space right now. But there's a lot going on and people want to be part of it. And I think that's just such a good thing for this conference.
Kelly, is Detroit unique in that way where they have the support from the business leaders and you see in the foundations that have really had to step up to plug the holes that have occurred? When you see business leaders or you see people raising money, $8 million to give to the police department for new squad cars.
That's a great question. I don't know of any urban core like Detroit anywhere in the country that is as devastated and as crumbling as Detroit is. So it probably and hopefully is unique in terms of its status, and how wonderful that people who have means are willing to help Detroit out. But at some point, and Kevin Orr's job is to help get Detroit up on its own so that it can stand on its own 2 feet. I read an article recently about Dan Gilbert and his acquisitions, and there was a comparison to sort of every 5 or 10 years there's a Dan Gilbert-like group of acquisitions. There was Peter Karmanos, there was Mike Ilitch. So can you really count on one guy every 5 to 10 years to come in and buy up a lot of stuff? Or do you need that commitment to permeate across an array of folks and not just one individual?
I think it's interesting that Kevin Orr is not up here. I understand that he's got to tend to the work that he's got down in the city of Detroit. But that leaves then what you talked about, the mayoral candidates who are now milling around. You also got Mayor Bing who's here. What are you hearing about the Detroit mayoral race, John?
That it's going to be interesting to watch. We just saw Mike Duggan a little while ago, and he's raring to go. He's got the talking points down. He knows exactly where he's headed. He said Benny Napoleon's a friend. So we'll see how that shapes up. The debate tomorrow should be very interesting. I think it's going to be a very competitive race, and I don't think we know where it's going or how it's going to shape up. I always say you never count Mike Duggan out. He's too many tough issues through his career to be counted out. So I look for a very spirited, very difficult campaign.
People might even say, Kelly, why would anyone want this job, given the state that the city is in, number one? Number two, the fact that Kevin Orr is going to be there for the next 18 months at least.
Well, I having worked for and with Mike Duggan when he was at DMC, I know this about Mike Duggan, and that is that nothing inspires him and motivates him more than the biggest, most unsolvable problem, the problem that no one else can fix, that no one else wants to fix. And that's exactly what the city of Detroit offers. So Mike, in my opinion, Mike is like a kid with a Rubik's Cube. He wants to take Detroit and figure out what it's going to take to align everything and fix it. And that's why I'm a strong Duggan supporter. I really am. I know from personal experience that that guy can fix the worst of problems.
Well, it's going to be interesting. We've seen some early preliminary polling putting him and Benny Napoleon neck and neck, and they kind of switch places a little bit on and off, and it's going to be a long race. I think we're in for a very interesting summer. But let's talk a little bit about Lansing and our legislators there and the tough job that they've had in the last couple of days in trying to shape the budget. Some good news came out talking about they've solidified the education budget. Is that a win for Governor Snyder?
I think it's absolutely a win. When you look at his last couple of years, proposing a budget, he's gotten pretty close to what he proposed, some minor tweaks, but that's the process. But he's getting it done early, which allows people who are the recipients of state funding, it lets them plan and do their budgets at a time. And it's been relatively controversial less. There has not been a lot of problem there. There's a few skirmishes here and there, but for the most part, it's gone extremely well. We have a surplus, so a little bit more money is going into schools and roads and things like that. But for the most part, you put this aside and you get on to other issues. And that's good, I think, for the legislature and the governor.
I was just going to say, I saw an email come across earlier today from Gretchen Whitmer, and the Democrats are not as pleased with the education budget in particular. I think everyone's delighted to see pre-K, early childhood education being funded, but there's deep concern, and I think one of the issues that's really hanging out there is the retirement, that schools are going to be required to pay all of those retiring teachers, and there's a huge bubble of them, and that comes right out of the student amount. So I don't know that we fixed that problem yet. I think it will continue to be one of the biggest challenges. We got a lot of challenges. Education, transportation. I actually put immigration, in my opinion, on the back burner. I don't see it as compelling an issue as education and transportation.
So let's talk about transportation a little bit, or let's talk about our roads and the fact that the governor made that a key centerpiece of his State of the State address. But that has gone nowhere in terms of getting that $1 billion to fix roads.
When I worked for Governor Engler, we had a phrase, when we take on a difficult issue, you kind of have to let the stew cook for a while. You put it out there, you let people mill around and throw their ideas in, get that shot down, you move to something else, that gets shot down. But in the end, everybody knows they have to do something, and roads is clearly an issue.
So you think that was just brought up by him to start the conversation?
I think to start it and say, this is my idea. If you have a better idea, let's hear it, and let's put something together. So you have a lot of different people putting different ideas in the mix. They haven't solidified anything yet. They still have a long way to go. In the end, I think there will be some sort of solution.
But it's also really fun to see as the discussion moves forward, what people ultimately are willing to accept and pay for. Grudgingly, they recognize the roads are terrible in our state. The recent bridge falling down in Washington is a result of infrastructure that is so weakened that a truck hits it and the whole bridge falls down. So people recognize there's an issue. It's what and how are they willing to pay for it? And what the last poll I saw said, folks are really willing to kind of step up and pay an increase in the sales tax if it's devoted to transportation.
All right, one conversation that you want to have up here. One interesting conversation. Besides right here, John. Besides right here. That you would consider it to be, that was a good week when you leave on Friday. I'm going to ask you the same question.
That's a great question. Kelly. That's not fair. She gets to think about it.
What's one conversation you'd like to have?
That's probably the best question I've had.
When?
I'd love to see the quadrant with the governor, all 5 of them sitting together You know, it used to be the big four. They're doing a quadrant discussion, I think tomorrow or the next day. I'd like to see the quadrant and the governor together really talking about and seriously
John's got his answer now.
talking about the issues.
I'd like to see the governor tell me he's running again.
I don't think we're going to get that yet.
I don't think we
I
have,
don't
but
think he
that's
has
you
to
said
tell you.
if I could have it.
I don't think
Should I
he has
ask?
to tell
He's
you.
going to be sitting down with me this afternoon. Should I ask
You
him that
should
question? All right.
tell him that I asked you to
Mark
ask.
Schauer.
I wanted to know.
All right.
Mark
Thanks so
Schauer's
much.
running, by the way, baby. I'm just saying.
Kelly Rossman McKinney, John Truscott, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to
And
see
you
you.
are
Thanks.
watching live coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
My Vote Mackinac is brought to you by ITC Holdings Corp., the Masco Foundation, DTE Energy Foundation, PVS Chemicals, Comerica Bank, and by MGM Grand Detroit.
And we are rapidly coming to a close of the first day of the Mackinac Policy Conference. I'm Christy McDonald. We're glad that you are with us. And I'd love to wrap it up with Rick Pluta, my favorite political reporter from the Michigan Radio Network. So
I bet you say that to all the reporters.
I say that to all the political reporters. But Rick, I'd love for you to give me a little perspective on what's happening in Lansing right now with the budget. We did hear the governor say education, they've firmed up what the budget is going to be there.
Let's even link it to what's going on in the island. That we had former Florida Governor Jeb Bush here today, widely talked about as a Republican prospect for president. He's really big on education reform, and he talked about more choice, more charters, more online learning. He begged Michigan to stick with the common standards that have been developed by the nation's governors to measure student performance. This very day in
Legislators
Lansing,
said no.
The legislature sent the governor a budget, said don't spend a dime on that. The governor says that he hopes that there's still some time to change some minds, but you know, that's just one example of the sort of gridlock that we're seeing on a lot of these critical, controversial questions in Lansing.
All right, so Medicaid expansion stalled.
Stalled. It's like everything is parked on I-75 at rush hour.
Let's talk about roads. The road money that the governor wanted, that he talked to the state of the state.
No, that right now, that's going to require a bipartisan coalition of legislators to get that through, Republicans and Democrats, and that's not happening. You look at the Medicaid expansion, that's being blocked by Republicans who say that they're not ready to go there. There's even a smaller Medicaid shortfall that business people are saying that we don't want to have to front the cost for that. So we're living in the age of, we're really living in an era of vetocracy in Lansing, that there are a lot of interests that are capable of stopping things, but no one's figured out the recipe for getting things to move.
Rick Pluta, in 15 seconds, what is the big headline you think is going to come out of Mackinac this year?
The big headline coming out of Mackinac this year is Rick Snyder and his Democratic rival, in all likelihood Mark Schauer, roaming the island and the Grand Hotel all at the same time.
And when they meet each other, they'll say?
They will not meet each other.
Make sure that doesn't happen. All right, Rick Pluta, thanks so much for joining me. And thank you for joining me for our first day of coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference right here at Detroit Public Television and myvote.org. We will be here tomorrow as well. Education is going to take a center stage. We'll be hearing about that. We'll also be here on Friday. So we hope that you join us. For all of us at Detroit Public Television, I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you tomorrow from Mackinac Island.